the cool thing about stepping my foot into this field is that every time we do anything, there's like a ton of questions.
Yeah.
And they all seem very approachable, and they all seem to me almost low-hanging fruit. Like we could do some of this, but that's a really interesting idea. We had thought it was like vaguely training we wrote in the book, or in the discussion of the paper were like, it might be training, it might be genetics.
Yeah.
Those are all really interesting ideas.
Canine Detection Collaborative. We bring the conversation straight to you. Training tips and helpful hints you'll actually use. Real insights from real experts with a side of laughs. Canine Detection Collaborative is where it's at. It all comes down to just one thing, helping our dogs be the best they can be. Canine Detection Collaborative.
Hi, this is Stacy Barnett from Canine Detection Collaborative. And oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this episode. I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Robin Greubel.
Greetings.
And we have an amazing guest today, Dr. Lindsay Waldrop.
Hi.
We are so excited. So Dr. Waldrop
Thank you.
has been posting these like mind-blowing videos of airflow and all of that. And it's just been, every time I saw one, I'd be like, this is so cool. And when Robin and I were talking about like who would be a good guest on the podcast, like Robin mentioned you, Lindsay, and I was like, yes.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much.
Oh my God. Yeah, I know. Like, Anyway, we're super, super excited to have you on. And I've got a long list of questions. And I'm sure we probably can't get to all of them, but I'm really excited. You have such an incredible background. Do you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and
How
kind
you
of
got here?
like how that relates to dogs and all that kind of good stuff?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be on. I always like to talk dog stuff. So my background is I am now an associate professor at Chapman University, which is a small, it's like, I guess, a medium-sized now private school in Orange County, California. So that's where I'm living right now. And before that, I'm really into fluid dynamics. So I am an experimental and computational fluid dynamicist that focuses on biological fluid flows. So my solid background is in biology, and then I have also background in physics and experimental and computational fluid flow. So I went to college at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I have a Bachelor of Science in Biology and a minor in physics. From there, I was really, really interested in fluid flow. I've been interested in fluid flow since I was in high school. I'm really interested in physics, but I also really like dogs. And animals. I wanted to be a veterinarian until I figured out I wasn't a good enough student to do that. I didn't get like the best grades in college, but I was very interested in doing research. So I went the PhD track and went and got a PhD in integrative biology at the University of California, Berkeley, where I had civil engineering fluid flow as part of the background there. But I also looked at my dissertation is on how crabs sniff and capture odor from fluid flow. So I bet you didn't know crabs sniffed.
No, did not.
Did not.
They do.
What do crabs sniff?
Crabs sniff all sorts of stuff, the same sort of stuff that anything trained to navigate their world would want to sniff out. They use it for mediating reproduction. They use it for finding food. They use it for avoiding predators, all sorts of stuff. So when they have these if you go to a fish market and you see the front of their faces between their eyes, usually you'll see these little toothbrushes and they're like flicking back and forth. And those are the crab noses. And I did the fluid flow on that as my dissertation. I'm like the world expert in sniffing by crabs, not of crabs. So, so I always have to explain this to people because the first thing people are like, crabs have noses? And I'm like, yeah, they do. So, but from there, I went back to UNC as a postdoc and I worked on computational fluid dynamics, learning how to model stuff. Especially like really, really small scale fluid flows are my kind of specialty. Not super small, so not like bacteria level, but like just those weird intermediate that I really like. And then I did another postdoc at UC Merced looking at experimental fluid flow. So setting up oil droplets through sharp stratifications. It's like a intensely physics-based topic that it has some relevance to biology, but mostly it was applied math I did that in. So, but yeah, in terms of that, my background really was mostly these sort of a little bit more esoteric problems of fluid flow. It's still biology and how organisms interact with flows. But recently I got really into dog stuff professionally. So I've always been really interested in dogs. My very first memory growing up was of our golden retriever throwing up behind the couch.
Because everybody knows what that sounds like.
Exactly. So I have this very vivid memory of this happening. That's probably the earliest memory I have.
That's funny.
But yeah, we had dogs for a long time. I had a bird, also a parakeet growing up. But I did junior showmanship in confirmation with my sort of backyard bred German Shepherd. And that was really fun. It kind of got me into that space, thinking about stuff. I also showed a friend of mine's golden retrievers in confirmation for a little bit while I was in high school. That stopped during college because I had to go off and do learning. But then I got back into it at Berkeley. I got a little border collie. She ended up being a border collie, Great Pyrenees, Australian cattle dog mix. And she was like literally the best little dog. Like she was the best. But I took like an intro to nose work class with her back in, oh my Lord, it must have been 2010 or 2011, something like that.
Wow. Right at the beginning.
Yeah. So, and then I volunteered at an NACSW trial around that. I can't even remember exactly when it was, but it was like out in Concord or somewhere out in the East Bay. And it was really fascinating. Like I loved it, but I was just not really in a place that I could devote a lot of time to that. But it kind of got me thinking of like, oh, wow, they're having these dogs do this cool training. And the trial that I watched, I remember going there and watching the person who instructed me run their dog. And I think it was an NW2, I'm pretty sure, because it was a little bit tough. And it was like at this elementary school, and they had sort of a covered walkway with some picnic tables. And it was a little bit windy that day, and they had hidden it in like a drain pipe from the roof, like a drainage pipe. Yeah. And it just befuddled the dogs. And I remember my instructor, who had this little Australian Shepherd, got it. And she was one of the only dogs who I watched and got that hide. And just thinking about how difficult of a fluid problem that must be for those dogs to figure out. So that I kind of parked that in the back of my mind, because this was like 10 or 15 years ago. And so I parked that in the back of my mind. And I was always like, oh, really complicated. How would you even start to figure that out?
Yeah.
And then when I got to Chapman, I ended up that we have a senior research conference every year in the spring for our seniors who do a lot of research and for honors and stuff like this. So we set it up as a little conference, and our keynote speaker that year was Lauren DeGrief at Florida International, who formerly was an undergrad at Chapman. So she had spoken, and it was, I believe, 2020. So it was during the pandemic, so we were all on Zoom. And so we had like a little breakout room as like a coffee break because they still wanted people to be able to chat with Lauren. I got on and be like, hey, like I'm really interested. I do nose work with my dogs. I had sort of gotten back into it as soon as we got here. I had a rescue Malinois who was never going to be a competition dog, but it helped her a lot with being nervous and stuff like that. And then my border collie mix who loved it. And so we got to talking, and she was like, your name seems really familiar. And it turns out she had worked and cited with some of my papers because it's really easy to visualize fluid flow in water as opposed to air.
Yeah.
Right.
And so she was like aware of my advisor, Mimi Cole, and at Berkeley and some of my work as well. So it was just this really fun thing. And so we started talking, and over the next year, I think we kind of was like, oh, we should do a proposal together. And we got this big Office of Naval Research grant to look at the morphology or the different shapes of dog skulls and how those might impact odor capture performance through sort of modeling and stuff like that. So we have some results from that. Our grant is over, but we're still kind of processing all the data that we got through that as well. So that's kind of how I got into the space. And yeah, recently I've competed a couple of times with my newer dogs. Well, my new dog, she's an Australian Shepherd Malinois mix. Like she's sort of cursed, but is amazing. Like she's awesome. But also like I have a Belgian Tervuren and she's like clearly the more difficult dog to live with. We got her at the animal shelter. So I say this and it's going to sound really mean, but like I get why somebody got rid of her because she's like a lot. I mean, she's perfect for me, but like I can get how that would be like a lot for a normal person. So no, we love her dearly. So we love her dearly. But I've tried NW2 a couple of times and we're still kind of trying to work through that. Really close. One hide missed each time. So, but yeah, I started just getting really interested in doing visualization of fluid flow because I talked to some groups about the importance of fluid flow and odor capture and searching and stuff like this. I default to odor capture because I'm all craps. But yeah, I started realizing that just the visualization of fluid flow that's relevant to the odor is something that's really difficult for people. And since I have this background in experimental fluid dynamics, that I've been trying to get a few more videos out there, some more information out there. I'm doing a talk, I think, for NACSW in August about how to better visualize fluid flow that is more relevant to the odor movement rather than just like fluid flow in general or hot smoke generating its own fluid flow. I'm like very anti-hot smoke, so for the most part. But yeah, so that's kind of my background where I've gone.
I've been watching, you had this cool little machine made, and then you use your red laser. And so tell us why your anti-smoke bombs.
So one of the things about, I'll say that it depends on a lot of things. So I'm an academic. So if you ask me a question, the first thing out of my mouth is going to be, it depends.
Right.
Which I know drives
dog training, right?
Dog trainers.
Exactly. I think once you get deep enough into knowledge of any subject, any simple question becomes, well, it depends.
Right.
So I think that we're kindred spirits in that way too. But a lot of things that are relevant. So we can't see odor, right? And this is one of the big things that's really problematic about even visualizing stuff experimentally. It's really hard to quantify fluid movement and air. And so fluid, when I say fluid, I mean either air or water. They're both fluids because it's tougher. We have more dyes and things that work in water. They're not as toxic and they just hang out in the water. They're more neutrally buoyant, so they don't sink or they float. It's just easier to do in water. But of course, it's not exactly the same. There are ways that you can play tricks to make them really similar, which is neat as experimentalists. But in terms of like, if you're out and you hide for your dog and you just wonder what's the relevant odor might be doing, you have to take into account a lot of different things. One is the buoyancy of the material. It's really important that the buoyancy is matched as close as you can. The problem is we don't actually know what the buoyancy of most odors are in the concentrations that are relevant to like a hide.
So when you're saying buoyancy, we usually think in the terms of lofty versus settling. So like, for example, essential oils are very lofty and our explosives odors tend to sink. Is that what you're talking about, buoyancy?
So buoyancy is just the relative density of one fluid with another. So, or one object with a fluid, something like that. So it's a density, but it's also a shape thing. If you think about a boat, it's more dense, but it has the shape that displaces the water and fills it essentially with air. So it floats. In terms of that, we think of like a little packet of whatever the odor is versus whatever the surrounding fluid air is, right? So there's less of a shape problem there. So something that's going to be more dense or just have more mass per unit volume is going to sink because it's going to be more negatively buoyant. So the density is the physical measurement and the buoyancy is the comparison, if that makes sense, between whatever you're talking about versus the air. So when I say negatively buoyant, I mean that is going to tend to sink, and positively buoyant stuff tends to float, right? So we don't know exactly, and it's hard to quantify this when you really get into the science. of the density of that odor-laden air is going to depend on the concentration of whatever it is, the physical properties of whatever that is, the temperature of whatever that is. It gets very hand wavy very fast.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I know that most of the things that we deal with the exception, and I think the only exception I know of is ammonium nitrate that is positively buoyant. Most every other thing is going to be a little bit negative. And how negative is going to depend on a lot of different things. And again, like there's probably stuff that is slightly positively, and also ammonium nitrate is if it's very, very humid, it tends to interact with the water and then get very negative pretty quickly, which is also very interesting.
Wow.
So it depends on the humidity of the air for that specific one. For a lot of other things, like I know all the nosework, I've talked to Lauren about this, all the nosework oils are basically a bunch of different types of terpenes.
Yep.
And those tend to be a little bit negative. So they tend to sink really, really slowly.
Yeah.
But if you think about sinking in terms of one thing that people use, I've seen people use in videos, is like the smoke from dry ice. That's very negative because it's also very cold.
Yeah.
So it's going to go down very quickly.
Right.
So that's also not super great because, again, when you talk about it being negative, you're talking about it probably going down very, very slowly. So if there's any sort of horizontal wind, that's going to take it right before it can really hit the ground. But something really negative is going to hit the ground really fast and spread in a way that's not particularly relevant to what the odor is actually doing. And so the hot smoke is the exact same problem, is that if you have a situation where you're in a room or you're in a situation where the flow is relatively slow, there's two problems going on. The first problem is that the smoke produced is hot and it's going to rise, which is not relevant to what the odor is doing at all. The second problem is that's a very violent chemical reaction and it's producing a lot of its own airflow, which of course is not relevant either to what odor is going to do. So generally, I'm pretty anti-hot smoke. I think it depends sort of realm. If you're in a situation where you're in a field, the wind is it's very windy. I don't think it's the worst because at least you see approximately what's happening and it's putting out enough material that you'll actually be able to see it. But in terms of, I've seen videos online of people putting like smoke mops in a box and stuff like that. And I'm like, that's not.
Well, that's a good way to light stuff on fire. But
It is. The thing about it, though, is it produces, like I said, a lot of material so you can see it. But I think it's important also to think about if you're seeing what you need to see, right? Just because you can see it doesn't mean that it's necessarily super relevant.
Right.
So the machine that I have produces smoke. It has a long tube that cools it down over time. So it's slightly negative, but probably, how much does it compare to odor? I have no idea. Like, I haven't done anything this is qualitative. It gets it pretty close.
Right.
It also there's nothing that puts out the movement. So I have a passive flow situation going on where I have a sort of an outlet that allows the wind or whatever air movement it is to sort of drive the smoke out of the tube as well. So it's not perfect. There is a little bit of motion created by just the differential in that heat. That's really hard to get rid of, but it's much closer to what is probably happening in those like super low flow situations. So like in a room, in a box, in an exterior where it's not really windy, stuff like that. So yeah, so that's one of the things that I've been trying to make more videos of. And the laser, of course, is just because it does not put out as much material as something like a smoke bomb does. But the laser has a little optic that spreads the laser out into a sheet, and it will just reflect off of those smart smoke particles so that you can see a lot more of what's going on and also see the sort of internal structure of how that plume is coming off. Now, is that the structure of the odor? Probably not, but it gives you an idea of just how complex that fluid flow is coming off of the area of that hide. It's not just a big, what people describe as a scent cone coming out. There's a lot more complexity within the structure of that scent plume that comes out that the dogs are. And so this is why I think the dogs have such a hard task of getting through it. It's not just that they're catching this. it's not just a scent plume that goes like, it's really strong at the center and then it gets progressively less and less smooth and concentrated as it goes out to the edges. It's very discrete. It's very discontinuous, the signal. So they might be in the center of it and take a couple sniffs and actually get nothing at all. So they're having to find this edge, and that's probably what they're doing, but it's way more complicated than just, I smell it a little bit here and nothing here, and a little bit here and nothing here. All over.
You're blowing a lot of people's minds right now, by the way.
Well,
yeah.
The layman view of I'm going to put it in air quotes, scent cone, especially in kind of like the nosework side of it, is exactly that. People kind of like, because they have such a hard time with visualizing.
Right.
And I think they hear scent cone, they think ice cream cone.
Right.
Right. And they start thinking more traffic cone or something, and they start seeing it as a continuous gradient.
Yeah. Yep.
Versus really kind of understanding. Can you talk a little bit about like the scent cone, scent plume, that kind of thing?
So just to give, it was really interesting.
Yeah.
We had Muscatatuck last weekend. And for one group, Chelsea Gill did a really, really good job of describing a visual for people to think about odor. And she used the clouds. And it was because we had, and I'm trying to look up like the appropriate type of clouds, right? And I'm not even going to try and say them because I'm going to get it wrong. But it was literally, you could see in some places the clouds were really, really white. And then they got wispy or see-through, right? And so that's how, okay, now you can answer, but I had to be all excited about that. So,
yeah. So the plume itself is, and this is, I mean, I guess kind of relatively, my advisor did a lot of work with John Cromaldi on this problem in terms of, so a lot of what we understand about plumes comes from their work in sort of the early 2000s or mid 2000s. And it is all in water because it's much easier to visualize stuff like this, plumes and things like this, just to put some dye in the water that you can hit with a laser beam and it fluoresces so that you can see basically a cut, slice through this visually, 2D slice, as opposed to looking through a plume. And this is like, it's not wrong to think that, because what we're doing as we look sort of through smoke, like through a smoke plume, is we're averaging all of that three-dimensional information with our eyes. And so it does genuinely look like one cone of smoke, right? The problem is that's not how the dogs are sensing it. And we're such like dumb visual monkeys that we can't deal with processing information in any other way except for visuals. So we have to break it down visually because that's like what most of our brain is structured around. Whereas the dogs have their brain structured around scent, so they understand it in that way. But once you do that 2D slice, you realize, oh, there's a lot of internal structure. And where that comes from is when you have an odor source, there's kind of two processes going on. There is the initial sort of diffusion or liberation of that odor, like actual material from the source itself. So if you think about the oil from nosework oils, or, the ammonium nitrate getting in the air, ammonia from ammonium nitrate getting into the air. And then this is sort of the diffusive part of it, sort of gets around into the center of the air. And then advection, which is what we call just the bulk movement of the fluid, takes that away. And as it's taking it away, it is this high concentration packet that starts to get pulled and mixed, almost if you've ever like made brownies and put your chocolate in, or put food coloring in a batter that's kind of thick. You notice that it doesn't like immediately color the batter. You really have to mix it in. And it's because it's being sheared and twisted into these little things. And eventually the diffusion will soften out the edges. And eventually if it's mixed enough, it will become like a solid color. But on the scale of time that we're usually trying to search through stuff, it's still in that sort of mixy phase. So when the dog takes a sample, which could be in between a ping pong ball and like a softball size of air, and there's a really interesting story behind that. We did a study not too long ago, me and Lauren, and realized that there's some big differences between operational and sport dogs in that way. But when they take the sample, they could be taking a sample of nothing, right?
Yes.
In the middle of the plume, it could be nothing.
Right.
Go back to that.
Because it just happens to be one of those, we call them odor filaments, is just not in that sample. Or they could be way out in the edge and it happens to be one of those really, really concentrated odor filaments gets it to that area and they get hit with a big, like, oh, that's a lot. That must be close, but it's not. And so dogs have to figure out this problem. And they do it very well. They do it very well. And I don't think we really understand how they do it as well as they do at this point.
Brain's blowing up.
Yeah. Because the odor filaments, I've been equating them to tendrils, right? And so, yay, a new word for my vocabulary. Okay, now because Stacy and I were freaking out while you were talking about the research that you were talking about between operational dogs and nose work dogs. So what's going on with that?
Yeah, so we originally did a study that we were really interested in the two different diffusion coefficients. So if you can imagine, the diffusion coefficient is how we measure how much diffusion spreads a particular substance out. And it's a physical property of the substance. And you can monkey with it with some of the qualities of air and stuff. But in air, how much that spreads out over time, that odor, and gets into the rest of the surrounding air is quantified with the diffusion coefficient. So originally we took two explosive dogs that are trained on ammonium nitrate, which has a very high diffusion coefficient. And I think if any of the operational folks are working with it, when you open the packet of your training aid, it decomposes into ammonia. And so that's what the dogs are picking up. And it gets everywhere instantaneously. It's just like everywhere all the time. And then it's really challenging for the dogs because it's so different. And then I think it's 1,000 times lower, which is 2E1H, which is a plasticizer for C4, which is the main component of the headspace of that C4 as it comes off. It's mostly just this plasticizer, so it stinks like plasticky, smell.
Right.
So dogs often train on that. We wanted to look at sort of learning of the dogs and how their kinematics, we were doing some nose tracking and stuff, 3-dimensional nose tracking and things like this, how sport dogs would learn to track this odor over time. So we trained the sport dogs who had never had any training on operational targets on these things. And we had trials at 1 week actually 0. And we handed out the training aids on that day. And then 4 weeks later and 6 weeks later. And we didn't actually find anything interesting in terms of learning at all. Like the dogs just picked it up as a new target and they were fine. They were NW3 dogs, like they were very well seasoned at doing this game. They just learned a new target. But then we had a wall with holes and we had flow sensors at the wall. And the odor was coming out the flow sensor. So most of the dogs put their nose right up to it. And so we actually could measure the speed and the volume of the sniffs that they were taking when they were interacting with this target. And, not perfect, but it was pretty good information. So then we had a bunch of operational dogs run the same thing in Florida. And we definitely did it in Florida. Lauren did it in Florida. And we found that the operational dogs, I think their sniff volume was like 10 times larger than the sport dogs on average when we controlled for size and breed. And
really?
Yeah. So they just consistently take huge volumes of sniffs, just huge. Whereas the sport dogs, even we had some Malinois mixes, something that dogs that are essentially about the same body size, taking these kind of like, I would say, daintier sniffs of stuff.
Would you theorize that it could be because the essential oil is so easy to acquire for the dog in terms of like it's pretty stinky, I guess is what I'm trying to say, versus where if the concentrations are higher? Like
I would rate the ammonia as very stinky.
I guess what I'm trying to think of is kind of compare that to like, and I'm not even just thinking about just ammonium nitrate, because I know you said that that's pretty stinky.
Right.
But when you're looking at the breadth of what those dogs have had to acquire, right?
Right.
Ammonium nitrate's on one end of it, but then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got much more difficult to detect odors.
Right.
And so could it be that because the dog has worked, the operational dogs have worked such a wide variety of odors and how hard they actually have to work to get into odor, that could it perhaps be that? Or did you have other theories? Or it's just very...
We definitely couldn't say because there's so many different things going on. We could just point this out as, oh, these are definitely like statistically significantly different. And these dogs are taking these massive sniffs.
Right.
I'm not sure if it's the odor, like the substance itself, rather than the availability of it.
Okay.
Because the odor, so like nosework dogs,
right,
they just like, if they're NACSW, it's like a couple of Q-tips. They have this way of doing it where the odor on the Q-tip may be varying levels of available.
Yep.
Like the mass on the Q-tip, like if you could measure that, is just variable. AKC, like they have like 3 drops of oil per Q-tip. So I walk into an AKC thing and I can smell it.
Right.
Yep.
So it's like this radically available odor. And like, that is a challenge for dogs, right? Obviously, I was talking to Andy Weidman and how operational dogs who are trained on really tiny amounts will often miss really massive amounts of explosives because it's just not the same odor picture. So that is definitely one thing. It's really interesting. And of course, explosive dogs have to get trained on all of these different odor availabilities, from extremely large, obvious sources all the way down to teeny amounts of it. So yeah, that definitely might be some of it. Of even drug dogs and stuff have like concealment issues, right? Like people wrap them up really tightly to try to conceal that odor so that they don't get it. That definitely might be a thing. Genetics might be a thing. The training methods might be a thing. Like the motivation even of the dogs going into the search might be a thing as well, because nosework dogs are mostly pet dogs. And they're they enjoy the game, but it's not I don't think it's the same as a lot of the operational dogs that are almost panicked about the game.
Right. Well, and I think about the training history of the dogs.
Yeah.
The operational dogs have much more reinforcement history for sniffing more frequently because that's how they acquire their odor.
Yeah. So I'd say sniffing a larger volume, but the frequency of their sniffing, like the actual, like if you measure this frequency, doesn't change. Not between operational dogs, not based on body size, not based on the amount of odor, not based on whether it's a target odor or if it's a blank or if it's a distractor.
Yeah.
So they sniff at the same frequency, which is wild. So when you're hearing something that sounds like a faster frequency, it's the larger volume. It's the speed of the airflow going in and out that you're thinking. But if you measure the actual, how many times a second it's happening, it stays the same.
Wow.
That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
So there could also be a fitness component to that. Wondering, because you look at a lot of the operational dogs and the fitness is generally different than a lot of the sport dogs. I'm not putting every sport dog into the same bucket.
Right.
Because the way the sport is evolving right now, you're getting a lot of really, you're getting working quality dogs in the sport world at this point. So, in terms of motivation and the genetics and all that, some of those dogs are starting to be kind of the same.
Right.
But, you do have to wonder if there's a fitness component. The other thing I'm kind of thinking of, and again, I'm kind of my brain is going in 12 different directions right now, is when you were setting hides for nosework dogs. And this goes for, if you're training, if you're trialing, even in trials, the hides are meant to be found.
Right.
So the dog's history of searching, they're searching for hides that are meant to be found, which is different than things that are trying to be hidden on purpose in order to not be found. And then I'm also thinking about search area size. I'm thinking about number of targets in the search area, right? How many blanks operational dogs generally do when they're actually working in an operational setting versus nosework dogs, where generally there's always odor in the environment. So I'm wondering if these things are so anyway, you got a lot of questions going through my head, that's for sure.
Yeah. the cool thing about stepping my foot into this field is that every time we do anything, there's like a ton of questions.
Yeah.
And they all seem very approachable, and they all seem to me almost low-hanging fruit. Like we could do some of this, but that's a really interesting idea. We had thought it was like vaguely training we wrote in the book, or in the discussion of the paper were like, it might be training, it might be genetics.
Yeah.
But those are all really interesting ideas. The idea of training on odor availability is really different, because in terms of that wanting to be found versus not wanting to be found, that's going to radically, I mean, in terms of the physical situation, what are you creating? You're creating a situation where the odor availability of that hide is just really, really low compared to the nosework dogs, right?
Right.
And I definitely know that even with the nosework dogs, I would sort of argue too, because I have like a lot of residual in my house, that even a small amount that may be residual from a Q-tip or something that's laying on a cabinet, they might be like picking that up, but then they don't get paid for alerting on that area where it's operational dogs, obviously have to alert to probably a way smaller amount of odor to alert for a hide as well. I know like training, how do you get rid of, residual odors, keeping them in like your little primary containment and stuff. But other than that, it's like, I know there's like all sorts of odor in my house all the time. My garage is a disaster. It's just like where all my odor kits are and we just don't do anything in there. So
my brain is also going to different applications of like I'm thinking like human remains, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you've got some dogs that are trained for just really large source human remains. So like a lot of USAR dogs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have maybe dogs that might be trained on more forensic level. And like I start getting questions in my head, like, are the sniffing volumes there different, even though the target odor is the same? And especially if you're dealing with some of the same genetics and that observation that you guys had, like it just opens up a boatload.
Oh yeah.
It opens up more questions than it answers.
Which is how it's good science.
Yes.
Honestly.
Yeah.
If you're doing science and you're like, oh, that's the question. That's the answer to that question. Okay. Like, and you move on. Like, I don't know. How interesting is that anyway? But yeah, I love that study. And again, we were looking at totally different objectives for that. We were thinking like, oh, they're going to take larger volumes on the target odor. Once they get close, like they're going to move. We did find that they moved really differently around those hides. The 2EH versus the ammonium nitrate. They did a lot of really confused work, much further away from like the hot hole on this wall rather than the 2EH ones just sort of looked at the holes only. Like they moved back and forth on the holes, and the ammonia dogs would when we did those, they would pick it up further away and work further away from the hole. So that was a really interesting finding as well. And that didn't tend to change with the 2-week periods that we had tested them against, which is really interesting as well. That was really interesting. And I think that diffusion coefficients can really matter when they're different. Like I said, most nosework oils are all probably going to be the same. I mean, you can estimate them and stuff like that based on their structure, and they're not going to be really different. But that was a totally unexpected result that we got. In fact, we went back and because we had a graduate student working on it, Lydia Burnett, and I was helping her with the coding for that. And she was like, I think I've done something wrong. Like, you need to just look at this. And I looked at it and I'm like, I think this is all correct. Like, this is just really large. Did you do the colors? So we went all through the experimental stuff. And yeah, it was just enormous samples. I mean, you almost never see something like that in terms of experimental results getting like almost an order of magnitude.
That's cool.
Difference. So yeah, that's really neat. But the human remains stuff, that's another really, really tough. Every time I think about it. So I just in March did a course with Sally Dickinson and Craig Schultz up at.
Yeah. You were out at the Search Dog Foundation. Yeah. So jealous.
It was so great. Like I'm going to rag a little bit on the academics a little bit here, but I came out of that experience talking with the trainers and the handlers and Sally and Craig, so intellectually energized in a way that it's been a long time since I've even been to a conference and been like, oh, I have so many ideas. Like, this is so exciting. It's so cool because the folks there were just so into it and just had such great stuff to talk about and great stories to tell about how their dogs had worked stuff and observations that I don't run an operational dog. I kind of understand like the mechanics of doing most stuff, but realistically, I don't deploy. I don't work operational situations. I don't train for operational situations. And so talking to folks that have that and that experience is it's really exciting because like, I don't even know what the questions are I should be asking at the time.
You have a standing invitation to come out to any of the camps or whatever we're doing.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
Here this summer.
Absolutely.
And you get to see baby donkeys, but
that's
added benefit.
Yes, that's an added benefit.
So if you want to come hang out, just let us know and you're more than welcome.
Cool. I might take you up on that because that, again, just like one of the things that's really interesting is that I have a lot of knowledge. I have like book learning, right? Like I have a lot of academic knowledge about stuff, but I don't know what's useful for operational people. So I asked, well, what would you like to know? And a lot of people initially are like, I don't know. But the more that we sit and talk about the dogs and talk about training and stuff like that, those questions sort of float to the surface of like, oh, I was in Oregon a couple of years ago and they were asking about different ways that they could do vehicle searches and stuff that might be really interesting, like different ways to alter their protocols. And so that was a really interesting thing.
My first thought for so many people is to understand how to set hides in such a way to replicate or provide an opportunity for dogs to run into odor pools that would mimic a long set time.
That's really interesting.
Because I especially for our cadaver dog handlers, we are never going to get called out in 30 minutes. They might be out there for 2 weeks. So I had a coyote run off with a hide earlier this spring.
Yikes.
In a tad.
Yeah.
So I have no idea where that's at.
Oh, shoot.
Right. And so the question is, how do we learn how to set hides in such a way that will help educate our dogs to solve those odor theory problems faster?
Yep.
That's so interesting. That's such an interesting idea because of a lot of different things. I'm going to have to sit and let this stew for a second.
That's fine. Well, so, but that's the whole purpose behind like our intentional handling and hide setting class.
Right.
Where we spend a week with students. But it's a problem when you have training aides that will walk away because, even the narcotics and the explosive handlers, they can't leave stuff sitting out unsupervised.
Right. So it's an issue of the longer set times will generally lead to more like a greater mass of odor being in the environment.
Correct.
So if that is the big goal, and how does it sort of mimic whatever's happening in the environment? I mean, arguably, if you're out in the woods or something like that, that the wind is blowing and unless it's coming from one direction all the time, it's kind of just going to get everywhere, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I'm sure that there's lots of games you could probably play with odor availability from your TAD, from
whatever,
heating it, not so much that it cooks, but so to kind of encourages off gases faster, making it very open to the air. Probably, even putting a fan on it.
Yeah.
You could put like a little Ryobi fan on it to just blow everything everywhere all of the time to get as much as you can possibly off of it in the shortest amount of time you can. That could probably help.
Something for you to ponder for a graduate student.
And in my head, I'm picturing like a warming plate, like a little hot plate, but nothing too hot with a tad, like a glass tad on it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you could just put a hand warmer under it, honestly.
Oh,
that's a great idea.
That's just, if you don't have electricity out there, you could just stick some hand warmers under it, like poach them and let it warm up and sit there.
I may have a whole box of those, Robin, I think up in my closet.
Ooh.
I have to, as soon as I go downstairs, I think I'm going to pull those out.
And throw them in the van for later.
Yes.
For later. So that might help, having it
for the summer
as unconcealed as possible for a while, sticking a little travel fan on it to sort of blow as much as that out into the environment as possible. I try all those things and just watch the dog and see what the dog tells you about it. If it's for, but that's like also a thing that we could probably test with a little bit more of a controlled study looking at. I'm really into doing, not very many people in this area do movement. Like they do like body kinematics, but they don't do like how the dog is searching an area very well. Mm-hmm. So while we were at the Search Dog Foundation, I think that Tracy was like, hey, do you have any interest in doing a drone thing? And because we have a drone. And I was like, sure, I can throw it up there. If it's not a problem, like I can see what we can do. We had one big search where they took their large source for human remains, which was, I am not used to this. So, so when we were on calls with like Sally and Craig, they were like, how can we just burn human flesh? Like what would be the best way to do this? And I'm just like, I'm going to just have to like sit here with that for a second.
I found prairie fires work really well when your husband is burning conservation property.
Proof.
Which is allowable, by the way.
Yeah, should be. Fire's healthy.
Yes. And literally, that's the easiest way I found to do it.
Just very natural. It's a natural burn.
I mean, like they were talking about, like, should we put it in a kiln and reduce it to ash, like, and all of this stuff. And I'm just like, what happens when you get trapped in your house and die in floodwaters and then they recede, like you mummify apparently. And I'm just like, I'm just going to have to sit with this for a second, guys. Because this is a lot of information for me. I'm used to drug and bomb and essential oils. So
our nosework handlers have just like fast forwarded.
No kidding. That's weird.
I mean, like, I will say for the nosework folks, if you all have never thought about training human remains, I actively avoided it for a long time because every time I thought about it, it was so, even the chemistry of it is so complex that it kind of like melted my brain down.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to do sort of a deep dive on it for doing this talk, really like go into the literature and stuff, which was its own little shop of horrors with the number of pictures of dead bodies. Like, I realized one time at like 5:30 Friday night, I was like looking at pictures of dead bodies and I was like, I should stop. Like, I should just go have a drink. I should be done with this week.
You should hear some lunch conversations at a cadaver dogs thing. Yeah.
Yeah. When we have our distraction camp and intentional handling in the hide setting, we have like we get like every odor, like any, like we're totally agnostic in terms of the type of odor. So we get people from all disciplines. And then when they come together, you see sometimes like our nosework, we have a lot of nosework handlers too. We love that cross-pollination, by the way. Yeah. But during the conversations, you start to see their eyes get bigger, bigger, bigger. And we're like,
right.
It's like all of a sudden people just kind of look at each other like, whoops.
I am just not a squeamish person at all. Like, I'm just not and even I was like, I'm just going to have to sit with that for a second. Like, I'm just going to have to sit with that for a second. So anyway, totally off topic for my story. It's very how my conversations go.
Yeah. We're kind of like that, by the way.
They have a cool boxcar crash simulated area where they have a couple of really old boxcars and one on its side. So they put it in the center one and we sent the drone up. And one of the things that I did was I took this drone footage, which was remarkably still. Just this wouldn't have been possible 10 years ago even. So this is why nobody's done it. And I took the software that I use for kinematic analysis and just tracked the dogs going through this area, threw it into the coding language that I have, and just did heat maps of where the dogs were spending time based on the points for each one of these frames. And it was really interesting. The handlers loved it a lot. And it gave me a good idea about trying to tease apart this idea of how are these dogs searching plumes. The problem is we don't know where the plume is. We tried to do some smoke afterwards with the smoke machine to see where it was coming out. It was coming out kind of where you would expect it to come out. but at least doing simulations or something like that might be a really interesting thing. But logistically, it was a really cool thing. And so I'm really interested in doing more of that.
Dude, I have 800 acres. You come out with whatever odors you want and we'll find dogs and drones, we'll do it. Yes. And graduate students.
Yeah. So we could also take a look at HR and LifeFind.
Yeah. Because I think that's really interesting.
And work. And
anything you want.
Anything we want. We got dogs for it.
We got dogs for it.
The really interesting thing about HR versus LifeFind, I know that Mary Walker, who was working as a handler. So she was working with Nathan Hall, I think, on her master's degree at Texas Tech. And I think she just got it.
Study.
I was.
Oh, you were. Oh, very cool.
The area search site for the air scent for the
very cool
for the wilderness dogs. Yeah, I was.
Yeah. So this interesting idea of like what makes a live find dog not find a dead person very reliably, and the idea that the only thing between a live person and a freshly deceased person is one of them is going to be breathing and one of them's not.
Right.
Which I think is very interesting, and I think they have some pretty compelling data to show that it probably is breath. Which is just such a cool study design, such a clever thing they did. They had people sit in rebreathers so that their breath wasn't escaping, but that they could still breathe. So rebreather is just a CO2 scrubbing mechanism that it's for when you want to dive, but you don't want to blow bubbles and you want to stay down longer and stuff. They're like terrifically dangerous things to dive with.
I bet.
But I have some friends who are cave diving and stuff, and they don't want to have the air out. They don't want to belch air out in these caves because it changes the total chemistry of the cage. And they study remipedes, like these little invertebrates that only live in caves, and like the most dangerous stuff. I don't know. Like, I don't have what I consider to be a death wish level of risk tolerance to study stuff like that. But he put these people in there, and I think they can show pretty reliably that it's probably the breath that LifeFind dogs really think. Well, now, if you look at the fluid situation of that, you have a person who's laying on the ground, typically, or not usually, I'm guessing, in trees and stuff like that. They're usually on the ground.
Oh, no. We can have them in trees too, because you've got... floods and stuff. Well, no, I'm thinking in terms of, if you're talking wilderness, we've got tree stands.
Oh, interesting.
Hunters, right?
Oh, interesting.
Hunters are up tree stands all the time.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff. If you wanted to do a controlled experience, having a field and on the ground versus somebody sitting up or even breathing out, laying down, they're ejecting all of that stuff way up into what we call the boundary layer, which is sort of the fluid layer that occurs when fluid hits a solid object. There's a layer that sticks to that solid object, and then everything else between the free stream air and that solid object has to sort of shear into this velocity gradient.
Then you got the vegetation.
And all the stuff sort of trapping that stuff in. If you're breathing out, and especially if it's heavy, something like that, it's getting into different spots, and it's more like that hot smoke, right? It's getting into area where isn't very relevant to something that's searching for things on the ground, but almost would separate out the what HR dogs might be finding about a person versus what live find dogs might be finding at a person. And so those might be totally different searches.
Yes.
For those between those dogs, because the odor is getting in a different place because of the positioning and just the nature of breath as being something that's getting away from you, right? Rather than just sticking towards your body, because there's nothing other than the fluid flow that washes that away.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
It is interesting. It is really interesting. And it's one of these things where, and that whole study is just crazy. But then my brain starts to go into climate, right? Vegetation cover, and all of our dogs at work, if we're talking wilderness at work across the country in totally different environments.
Oh, for sure.
Where I started training my dog was out east in the Pocono Mountains, right? Mm-hmm. And that climate is so different even than when I got my NASAR certification in Iowa, and we had tall, you have tall grass and you have all these, and it is just
humidity.
And yeah. I mean, then you have corn sweat, right?
Corn sweat, because it's a thing.
Corn sweat's a thing. And then you start comparing that to like where Mary Walker's from, right? Where she's out in New Mexico. And it's just such a, anyway, my brain starts
Crazy.
going. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's lots and lots of complicating factors for that make it both very, very interesting and very, very difficult to ask some of these questions, because you have to, at some point, narrow it down to something specific and then control as much as you can across it to do stuff. So it's really just, it's a fascinating idea. I'd love to start doing this more with kind of this overhead drone work, because you can really get an idea of, you might be able to do a smoke bomb or do some kind of cold smoke approximation of something in a field. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be okay. And then start working on dog tracks through that area to see what are how are they figuring out where this plume is, tracking it, seeing direction. There's so many different aspects of that search that we don't understand very much about. We understand a little bit about stuff. I always go back to invertebrates too, because most of the stuff that we really understand about the mechanistic qualities of how animals track plumes are done on things like lobsters and crabs and moths. Partially because you can do terrible things to these experimentally and nobody cares because they're invertebrates. There's lots of paperwork involved with even touching a dog.
Right. Yes, there is.
In fact, we don't even like our protocol that we have to get through the institutional animal care and use procedure. So we have an oversight of everything we do with vertebrate animals. We're not even allowed to touch the dogs. We just videotape them, Yeah. So like if anything has to be done to the dog, the handler has to do it to the dog. So it's really intense, but it's important because like terrible things have been done, and we don't want to we want to make sure that we have appropriate oversight that's everybody else thinks it's also a good idea, because you can have plenty of good ideas as scientists that may not actually seem like good ideas to anybody else to do with dogs and other stuff. But invertebrates don't have this layer of bureaucracy to get through. And so you can do stuff like cutting an animal's antenna off a moth, and you can wire it up and it works just like a pheromone sensor as it was still on the animal. So you can understand a lot more about what's hitting where, how those signals are coming through to the animal, how they're integrating potentially that information through. But even then, a lot of the research that's been done is animals working sort of up a plume that's in some kind of constant flow. We don't have as much stuff with variable flow, and we don't have as much stuff with animals that don't just respond to, their memory is very short. They only have a few thousand neurons or something that tracks it. Now, dogs probably aren't doing a lot different than that. They probably are tracking a lot like moths, but they also can remember and they can also learn. So, and those are two really big things that moths can't do that make dogs probably way more successful, because they can do things like go into an area where there is no odor and think, oh, well, there's nothing here. I'm going to go and remember there was nothing there at that time. So,
right.
Where moths can't do, if they get into an area of odor, a lot of times they just turn around and just never find it. They just keep making turns and never find stuff until they come back and hit the edge of the plume. So all of those things I think are very interesting. I would love to do some modeling with it as well. I'd love to do some sort of agent-based modeling. And then we have some, I'm working with a mathematician I've been working with for 10 years now. Very good collaborators. And she and I have been thinking about doing fuzzy logic decision makers. And also it's some kind of new math. Every time I talk to her, she's like having to explain new math to me. And I'm like, this is so cool. And I don't understand a single bit of it. But if it's a good idea to you, then we should do it.
Mathematician, that they get a free pass, right? Okay, sure.
So the mathematicians they have so many ways of solving problems, and they just need problems to apply it to a lot of times.
Right.
If they're interested in this, there are some pure mathematicians that are in it for the sake of the math, and they're not, I don't think there are too many of them, but they don't want anything applied because that would sully their math. But most of them actually, and like I've said, I kind of give pure mathematicians a little bit of a hard time because I grew up in an applied space, and there's a tension there between the two groups. But the applied mathematicians are really interesting because they have this way of dealing with problems that is very, very exact. It's very powerful. It's very good in a lot of the ways that we're limited in an experimental realm, but it doesn't get out very fast because it stays within applied math world. And so I love that she's willing to interface with me. And let me tell you, the first conversations that we had were so talking skewed from us because she had to explain the math to me, which I did okay in math. People think that I'm like this amazing mathematician, and I'm like, I do okay when I learn the type of thing that I need to do, then I do fine at it. But like, am I trained in math? Not really. Do I need a lot of time to understand something new? Yes. So work into it. You can do it, but
us normal folk, right? I'm just like, you're talking about this, and I'm sorry, I'm just like thinking about like, okay, you and your 52 degrees, and
it's just two. Like, but no,
I'm like, oh my God.
It's very interesting that I did not do particularly well in math in college. I think I like to tell my undergrads that are all I teach mostly biology majors here, and they're all scared of math, and I teach computer science. They're scared of that too.
Well, yeah.
And I am just like, yeah, it turns out that to do things with math, you don't actually need to be super good at it. You need to be super good at that thing. And that's just training. That's all that is. It's just training. And I will say learning math is easier than learning dog training because it's much more straightforward and the rules are much clearer.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't take like repetitions of like to train a dog and to be really good at it. You just have to have hands on like hundreds or thousands of dogs to know, right? You do not have to work that hard to get that. I promise.
So
I have not hit the I believe button on that one.
So when you're doing your modeling, right? I'm assuming you have super cool computer software that does all the math, right?
Yeah, it's mostly software based.
Awesome.
Mostly I fight with the software. That's mostly what I do. So.
Yeah. What have you found for surfaces that create the most interesting odor movement?
Yeah.
Ooh. So most of my modeling right now is internal. So it does a lot of stuff internally in the dog's nasal passages.
Okay. Oh, yeah, because I want to get to that, the skull and the breathe.
Yeah.
Right.
I haven't done a lot of stuff. So the program that I work with is called ANSYS Fluent. And it's a very expensive, I have to renew my license, it's very expensive proprietary software.
The company should donate a usage license.
I don't think they will, but I mean, it would be nice.
Right.
Yeah, my contract is so small that I can barely get anybody to. I mean, they do like large industrial stuff and engineering firms that they do huge amounts of business there. And there's me. I'm like, oh, I want to spend $10,000. Can you send me an email back? And they won't do it because it's just like not worth their time.
Right.
But I mean, eventually we got connected, so it's fine. It's a good, very powerful software. It's kind of got a hard learning curve, and you do need to know a lot about fluid mechanics to understand like how to use all the options and what's appropriate to how to set things up and stuff like that. I'd love to do more fluent stuff, but I think one of the big issues I have with a lot of modeling stuff that's done is the it depends question.
Right.
It depends. I've had people ask me specifically, can you model this situation for fluid flow so I understand it? And they're talking about something where I have no idea what the wind's doing. I have no idea what the heat's doing. I have no idea, how high the vegetation is or what the landscape is like, the topography, all of these things. So it becomes maybe I could spend 6 weeks setting up a model of the situation and I could tell you what happens if the sun is like this, if the wind is like this, if
right.
This, And so I'm like, I'm not really sure that that's worth it to understand.
Right.
And then the model has to run for a month on 16 GPU processors for full time for a month to get the simulation to simulate 10 minutes of time. Right.
Wow.
So it's like one of those things that even though with our powerful modeling and computer software and things like this, it's so variable that I'm not sure what what would you get out of that you couldn't get out of doing a quick flow viz, right? Which even if it's smoke, if you had it contained, got it slowed down, got it cooled down, you would learn way more than me spending, 3 months of time doing a model, setting it up in that situation. So the modeling is, I think people think it's a little bit magic, and it kind of is. It's like really cool to be able to do stuff, but I don't think that it's not as quick and as powerful as well, it's as powerful, but it's not as quick as people think it is in terms of the modeling. So I haven't gotten much into environmental modeling just because it's far abreast of usually what I'm interested in doing. Now, that having been said, what we could do if we did some of this work with overhead dog stuff is we could take wind measurements from around, approximate what's happening to that plume using some kind of simulation, right? And I would make it a dirt field and make it simple.
Right.
So I wouldn't have to tell myself trying to get everything exactly right to make it meaningful model for what I wanted to do. Because then you have to get this through peer review, and then you're going to get picked apart by the people who do this as well, which tends to be hard. The computational modeling folks take their job very seriously, which is good, but they don't seem to be oh, I want this as a general qualitative thing. It's not what they do. They do quantitative, so I have to balance that, what's going to get through peer review as well in terms of publishing stuff. And I'd love to just sit and model all the time, but I get judged on how many papers I write and how many times I get cited. So I have to keep that in mind when I want to keep my job. So although I just got tenure, so I have to worry about that a lot less. So thanks. That just happened in late March. So
yay!
Pleased with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Hi, everybody. So we're going to stick a pin in this particular conversation with Dr. Waldrop, because I'll tell you what, it was really hard to figure out where to splice everything because of the ongoing conversation we were having. So we're going to stop right there, and we're going to pick up the whole rest of the conversation, including some of the really great work that she's doing around the fluid flow and everything, for next time. So come back for part 2 in 2 weeks.
K9 Detection Collaborative.